Exactly for this specific reason, we absolutely require a sweeping and comprehensive overhaul of campaign finance regulations within this nation. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's voice resonated powerfully throughout the confines of the Senate Budget Committee hearing, chamber-piercing, and self-assured, as she positioned herself firmly at the witness table, gesticulating with notable emphasis, while her characteristic crimson lipstick and large hoop earrings reflected the bright illumination of the CS-PAN television lights. Unaccountable dark money is systematically eroding and dismantling the fundamental structural integrity of our democratic institutions, she pursued with her distinct Brooklyn accent, emphasizing every single resiety, syllable billionaires, and massive corporate entities are essentially purchasing procurement outcomes, while ordinary working families find themselves struggling desperately just to basic rent obligations. And the elected officials elected within this very room directed her finger accusingly towards the Republican side of the dais, accepting millions upon millions from corporate political action committees and subsequently cast their votes in direct opposition to the actual needs and well-being of the constituents who voted them into office. Senator Ted Cruz remained absolutely motionless in his leather chair, with his fingers tented thoughtfully beneath his chin and his facial expression, betraying absolutely zero emotion. He had not shifted his physical contrage's position in fully 15 minutes, AO said, to confront him. Feeling emboldened by his prolonged silence, Senator Cruz, you personally have accepted more than $2 million from the oil and gas industries. $2 million, and, subsequently, you voted against climate change legislation on the single occasion that consists of corruption rather than representation. That is indeed Congresswoman Cruz's voice, linked through the atmosphere of the chamber like a surgical scalpel, quiet and precise and deadly. AOC paused mid-sentence with her finger still elevated in the air. I possess a specific inquiry for you, Cruz continued with his Texas drawls, how rendering the words significantly more threatening before you conclude your lecture, regarding dark money and political corruption. He leans on his Nuvert, body forward ever so slightly, with his eyes fixed intensely on hers. What exactly is brand new Congress? LLC. The room fell instantly silent, not the polite quietude of a conversational pause, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a trap being suddenly sprung. AOC's hand descended slowly, and her expression of confidence flickered for just a split second. Yet the cameras captured the micro-expression that is not relevant to, oh, I believe it is. A highly relevant Cruz reached down and hoisted a substantial manila folder onto the wooden table before him, the thud echoing throughout the chamber. You have utilized the past 15 minutes to lecture this committee regarding dark money and transparency and concealing their funding sources. Cruz' voice remains steady and almost conversational. So permit me to inform you about Brand New Congress, LLC. He opened the folder with calculated precision. It is a corporate entity that received in excess of $800,000 from political action, committees directly associated with your own campaign, a company that is controlled by your own chief of staff, a company that, according to our research, does not appear to be registered in any state within. America gasps rippled through the gallery, and reporters commenced frantically typing. Cruz continued with his voice, hardening a company where nearly $1 million from working-class donors, the very people you claim to represent, simply disappeared with no disclosure, no accounting, and no transparency. He looked up from his folder, his eyes meeting AOC's. You wish to discuss dark money? Congresswoman, let us discuss your dark money. AOC's voice rose sharply. That is a gross mischaracterization. Is it, Cruz? Interrupted. Because I possess FEC complaints. I possess financial Records. I possess statements from former Federal Election Commission officials stating your operations makes no sense unless you were attempting to conceal something. He retrieved another document. So, before you lecture this committee regarding corruption, perhaps you should explain why your own operations managed what appears to be the largest dark money scheme in progressive politics. The chamber erupted with voices shouting over another, Chairman Lindsey Graham's gavel banging repeatedly through. The chaos Cruz voice remained steady, cutting through the noise like a blade class is in session. Congresswoman, and today's lesson concerns what transpires when the dark money queen gets exposed. The gavel finally restored order. Senator Graham's voice boomed through the speakers. The committee will come to order, Senator Cruz. You have the floor. Cruz nodded, slowly adjusting his microphone when he spoke. His voice had accelerated no longer. Confrontational but methodical prosecution. The voice of a man who had argued 9 cases before the United States Supreme Court. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to walk the American people through exactly what Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's operation did. Step by step, dollar by dollar, he pulled out the first document from his folder in 2016. A man named Sikat Chakrabarti created something called the Brand New Congress PAC. The stated mission was noble elected regular working people to Congress, give voice to the voiceless. Fight the establishment. Cruz paused, letting his words hang in the air. In 2017, Chakrabarti created another PAC called Democrats. Same mission, same message. Together, these tourized approximately $3.3 million, most of it in small 20 donations, $7 here, $50 there, working people sending what they could spare because they believed in the cause. His voice softened slightly, almost sympathetically. Teachers, nurses, students with debt, they gave their money because they thought they were funding a revolution funding candidates who would fight for them. Then his voice hardened. But here is where it gets interesting. Congresswoman Cruz flipped another page. Those 2 PACs transferred over 1 million nesters, dollars to 2 private companies, Brand New Congress LLC and Brand New Campaign LLC, both controlled by Sikat Chakrabarti, the same man who ran your campaign and later became your chief of staff. He looked directly at AOC. Now, why does that matter? Because PACs have to disclose everything. Every dollar in, every dollar out. The American people have a right to know where political money goes. Cruz leaned forward. But LLCs, private companies, they have no disclosure requirements. Once that money hit those LLCs, it disappeared. Nobody knows where it went. Nobody knows who got paid. Nobody knows if it was used for legitimate campaign purposes or he paused meaningfully or for something else entirely. AOC grabbed her microphone. Senator, those were legitimate payments for strategic consulting. Strategic 20 TPI, consulting, Cruz repeated, his voice dripping with skepticism. That is the label that appears on every single payment over $1 million. And every single transaction just says strategic consulting. No details, no breakdown, no explanation. He pulled out another document. Let me read you what former FEC Associate General Counsel Adavi said about your operation. This is a man who spent years enforcing campaign finance law. Quote, none of that. They makes any sense. They are either confused or they are trying to hide something in, quote, Cruz. Let that statement hang in the air. Former FEC Chairman Brad Smith called it, quote, a really weird situation. Another campaign finance expert said, quote, I cannot even begin to disentangle that these are nonpartisan experts. Congresswoman, people who have seen every trick in the book, and your operation left them baffled. He flipped to another page. But here is the truly remarkable part we tried to find. Brand new. Congress LLC. We searched Delaware corporate records since that is where Brand New Campaign LLC was registered. Nothing we searched New York. Nothing we searched every state database we could access. Cruz's voice dropped lower, more ominous. Brand New Congress LLC does not appear to be registered anywhere. A company that received over $800,000 from political action committees does not officially exist. There is no record of where or when it was incorporated. He looked up at AOC. So, I will ask you directly, Congresswoman, where is Brand New Congress LLC registered? Where did that money go? And why does a company that received nearly $1 million have no official existence? Silent. AOC's jaw tightened. Her press secretary seated behind her frantically scribbled notes. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat from Rhode Island, leaned into his microphone. Mr. Chairman, I object to this line of questioning. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez is a witness on campaign finance reform, not the subject of an investigation. With respect, Senator Whitehouse Cruz interrupted gently. The Congresswoman spent 15 minutes lecturing this committee about dark money and corruption. I think it is entirely appropriate to check whether her own operation meets the standards she is demanding of everyone else. He turned back to AOC. You call dark money the enemy to democracy? Those are your exact words. Congresswoman, you have said corporate PACs are destroying our politics. You have demanded transparency. From everyone else, Cruz's voice rose slightly. But your own operation funneled over $1 million through private companies with no disclosure. Your own PACs paid a company that does not appear to exist. Your own chief of staff controlled entities that swallowed donors' money into a black hole. He closed the folder with a sharp snap. That is not transparent, Congresswoman. That is the very definition of dark money. The only difference between your operation and the corporate PACs you attack is that they actually follow the law. Cruz opened his second folder. His movements deliberate and unhurried. The room had grown uncomfortably quiet. Even the usual background noise, coughing, chair creaking, papers shuffling, had stopped. Let us continue down the money trail, Cruz said, his voice taking on an almost conversational tone. Congresswoman, who is Riley Roberts? AOC's eyes narrowed. My partner? I do not see what your partner lives in the boyfriend man, who since you have taken office has been given a congressional email address and access to your official schedule. Cruz nodded slowly. Let me tell you what your partner has to do with this investigation. He pulled out an FEC filing, August 2017. New Congress PAC makes a payment of $3,000 to Riley Roberts. The description, marketing, consulting, Cruz. Flipped to another page. September 2017, another payment, $3,000. Same description, marketing, consulting, total payments to your boyfriend from a PAC controlled by and your chief of staff. $6,000. He looked up now. By itself, that might not seem significant. People get paid for campaign work all the time. But let us look at the context. Cruz pulled out a timeline he had prepared in the summer of 2017. Your campaign was in serious trouble by October. You had raised only $3,327.50, but you had already spent over $27,000. More than half of that, over $18,000, went to your chief of staff's company, Brand New Congress LLC. He paused. Letting the numbers sink in. Your campaign was nearly bankrupt. You were spending money you did not have. And right in the middle of this financial crisis, the PAC controlled by your chief of staff starts paying your boyfriend. Cruz's voice grew harder. A political analyst named Luke Thompson looked at these payments. His conclusion, and I quote, It looks to me like Chakrabarti was effectively reimbursing AOC for a third of her expenses with brand, New Congress LLC perhaps, so that she would stay in the race. Despite her mounting debt, AOC leaned into her microphone. Riley provided legitimate marketing services. What services? Cruz shot back. What specific marketing did your boyfriend provide? What deliverables? What work product? Because the FEC files do not say just marketing consulting, that is it, $6,000 for services nobody can describe. He pulled out another document. The Coolagay-Reagan Foundation filed an FEC complaint specifically about these payments they cited. And I quote, "The vague and amorphous nature of the services Riley ostensibly provided, the relatively small amount of money raised by the campaign at that stage, and this is important, the romantic relationship between Ocasio-Cortez and Riley Cruz's voice dropped to a near whisper that somehow carried through the entire chamber. Federal law is very clear. Congresswoman campaign contributions shall not be converted by any person to personal use if money flowed from donors to a PAC. Boyfriend to you. That is not a campaign expense, that is potential federal election fraud." Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, interrupted Mr. Chairman. "These are serious allegations. Without any, they are not my allegation." Senator Murphy Cruz replied calmly, "They are in an official FEC complaint. I am simply reading from public records." He turned back to AOC. "Let me explain why this matters. Congresswoman, federal PACs can only contribute $5,000 directly to a campaign. That is the law. But if your chief of staff's PAC was paying your boyfriend as a way to funnel money to you personally, that then supported your living expenses while you campaigned, that is a scheme to evade. Contribution limits." Cruz's voice hardened. "Your chief of staff controlled the PAC. The patty paid your boyfriend. Your boyfriend lived with you. You were paying your chief of staff's company. See how that looks. It is a circle. And in that circle, donor money meant for campaign expenses might have been flowing into your personal life." Cruz paused his voice, taking on a more somber tone. "Let me tell you who financed this operation. Congresswoman. Not billionaires, not corporate executives, working people. A retired teacher in Ohio who sent you $50 because she believed you would fight for public education. A nurse in California who gave $27 because she wanted Medicare for all. A student in Texas with $40,000 in debt, who scraped together $35 because you promised to fight for loan forgiveness." His voice grew heaviest. "Those people gave you their money they couldn't really afford to give. And where did it go? To a PAC controlled by your chief of staff to your chief of staffs, private company to your boyfriend. Did any of them know that is where their donations would end up? Did any of them consent to funding Riley Roberts? Marketing, consulting." Cruz shook his head slowly. "You talk about fighting for the little guy, you talk about standing up against the powerful. But when the little guy gave you their hard-earned money, your operation funneled it through a maze of PACs and LLCs that nobody could follow." He leaned back slightly. "You came to Congress promised to drain the swamp. But Congresswoman, you did not drain the swamp. You brought it with you. Your boyfriend got paid. Your chief of staffs, companies got paid. And those working-class donors who sent you $27, beguy. Because they believed in your message. They got played." Cruz paused to take a sip of water. The hearing room remained eerily quiet. AOC sat rigid, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the table. "Let us talk about Saikat Chakrabarti." Cruz continued, setting down his glass. "The man at the center of all of this. Your chief of staff, the architect of your campaign, the controller of the PACs and LLCs we have been discussing." He pulled out a new set of documents on August 2, 2019. Chakrabarti, was resigned from your office. The official story that he wanted to work on climate policy, very noble, very convenient. Cruz's voice took on a sardonic edge. But let us look at what was actually happening in August 2019. First, the FEC was actively investigating the PAC payments we just discussed. Second, multiple ethics complaints had been filed. And third, perhaps most importantly, your own Democratic colleagues were demanding that you fire him. He read from a news article. Fox News reported that Democratic lawmakers asked Ocasio-Cortez to fire Chakrabarti in an attempt to start over. The Intercept reported that his departure came after public divisions within the House Democratic Caucus. Even the official House Democratic Caucus Twitter account, controlled by Representative Haki Jeff, attacked your chief of staff directly. Cruz found the relevant quote, and I quote, from the House Democrats' official account. Who is this guy? And why is he clearly singling out a Native American woman of color? That was their response. After Chakrabarti attacked Congresswoman Charisse Davids as her vote on a border bill, he looked up at AOC. Your own party was furious with your chief of staff. They accused him of racism. They demanded he be removed. And then, facing FEC investigations and Democratic revolt, he suddenly decided to leave to work on climate policy. Cruz shook his head slowly. That is quite a coincidence, is it not? The man who controlled the dark money operation, the man who paid your boyfriend, the man who funneled $1 million through unregistered companies. He happened to resign right when the investigations were heating up, and your own party wanted him gone. AOC finally spoke. Her voice tight. Psycat left to work on the Green New Deal he wanted to focus on. Climate? Ah, yes, the Green New Deal. Cruz interrupted. Let us talk about that. Because before he left, your chief of staff gave a very revealing interview. He found the relevant document. This was reported by the Washington Post in July 2019. Chakrabarti was asked here about the Green New Deal, is what he said. I want to read this exactly, because it is important. Cruz read, slowly emphasizing each word. Do you guys think of it as a climate thing? Because we really think of it as a how do you change the yide of scissor span? Entire economy thing. He let the quote hang in the air. Your own chief of staff admits it. The Green New Deal, your signature proposal, the plan you say will save the planet, was never primarily about climate. It was about, in his words, changing the entire economy. Cruz's voice rose. That is not environmentalism, Congresswoman. That is socialism. That is government control of every sector of American life. And your chief of staff admits you were using climate change as a Trojan horse to smuggle it in. He continued, before AOC could respond, let me list what else Chakrabarti did before his convenient resignation. He compared moderate Democrats to the Southern Democrats who fought against civil rights in the 1940s. He wore a shirt featuring Subhas Chandra Bose, an Indian nationalist who allied with Adolf Hitler and broadcast Nazi propaganda. He constantly attacked fellow Democrats on Twitter, creating chaos within your party. Cruz spread his hands. This is the man who built your political career, the man who controlled your dark money operations, the man who admitted your signature policy was never really about what you stated. And when the heat got too intense, he disappeared, leaving you to answer for everything. He paused, but you have not answered. Yes, you have never explained where that $1 million went. You have never explained why your boyfriend got paid. You have never addressed your chief of staff's admission about the Green New Deal. You have just attacked anyone who asked questions. Cruz, leaning forward, that is not transparent. Congresswoman, that is a cover-up. Cruz shifted in his chair, his tone becoming almost conversational. The calm before another storm. Let us step back from the financial scandals for a moment, he said. Let us talk about your qualifications to lecture Congress. About economic policy, AOC straightened, slightly, perhaps relieved at the change of subject. I have a degree in economics from Boston University. Yes, you do, Cruz agreed pleasantly. And you mentioned that credential frequently. When discussing policy, you have said, and I quote, I studied economics. You have used your degree to claim expertise on tax policy, labor markets, and government spending. He smiled slightly, not warmly, so I was confused. When I watched your interview on PBS's Firing Line in July 2018, Margaret Hoover asked you about the strong economy and low unemployment rate. Do you remember what you said? AOC's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. I remember the interview. Let me refresh. Your memory Cruz pulled out a transcript you said, and this is a direct quote. Unemployment is low because everyone has two jobs. Unemployment is low because people are working 60, 70, it's 80 hours a week and can barely feed their family. He set down the transcript. A law degree. But even I know that is not how unemployment is calculated. And I would think someone with an economics degree from Boston University would know it too. Cruz's voice took on a professorial tone. Let me explain. For the American people, watching the unemployment rate counts people, not jobs. If you have one job, you are counted as employed. If you have two jobs, you are still counted as employed. Once, whether someone works one job, 5 jobs has absolutely no effect on the unemployment rate. He picked up another document, PolitiFact, which I am sure you will agree is not a conservative outlet. Rated your statement. Their verdict, pants on fire. That is their worst rating. The rating they deserve. For statements that are not just wrong, but spectacularly, laughably wrong. Cruz read from the fact check, even taking into account rhetorical excess. Her statement is off. In many ways, fewer than 1 in 20 employed Americans holds a second, the job, of any type, and the people who might be working as much as 70 or 80 hours a week represents a tiny fraction of that tiny fraction. He looked up the actual numbers. About 5% of workers holding multiple jobs. That is not everyone, and that the rate was actually lower than it had been during the economic boom of the 1990s. You were not just wrong, Congresswoman. You were backwards, leaning into her microphone. I was making a wider point about working families struggling. You were making a false point. Cruz interrupted. And here is what is remarkable. When fact-checkers called you out, you did not correct yourself. You folded down. You said you were making a wider point. But you cannot make a wider point by getting the basic facts completely wrong. He set down the fact. Let me quote Harvard economist Gabriel Coro-Reich, who explains why you were wrong. Whether someone has multiple jobs does not enter in thought the construction of the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate is calculated from a survey of individuals where each individual is classified as having a job without a job and actively searching or out of the labor force. Cruz spread his hands. This is Economics 101. Literally the first week of any introductory course. And you got it? Completely wrong. While trying to sound authoritative on national television, his voice hardened. So let me connect the dots. You have dark money schemes you apparently do not understand. You have campaign finance laws you apparently do not understand. And you have basic economics you apparently do not understand. But you are confident enough to lecture Congress about corruption. Confident enough to propose reshaping the entire American economy. Confident enough to tell us your plans will save the planet. Cruz leaned forward. Congresswoman, you do not understand how the unemployment rate is calculated. Why should anyone trust you to calculate the costs and benefits of a $93 trillion proposal? Cruz paused, organizing his next set of documents. When he looked up, his expression had less confessional more sorrowful. Let us move from theory to practice. He said, let us talk quietly about what happens when your ideas affect real people. Let us talk about Amazon. AOC's chin lifted slightly. I am proud of that fight. I am sure you are, Cruz. Voice remained soft, almost gentle. Let me tell you what the people of Queens think about it. He pulled out a folder, marked Amazon HQ, 2 November 2018. Amazon announces that, after a public search, they have chosen 2 locations for their second headquarters, one in Arlington, Virginia, one in Long Island City, Queens, right next to your district. Cruz read, from an economic analysis, the deal. Amazon will invest 2.5 billion in New York, create 25,000 direct jobs, average salary 150 million. Over time, the development would generate more than $10 billion in tax revenue for the state and city. He looked up 25,000 congresswoman jobs in your backyard. Jobs for your constituents. Good jobs, jobs with benefits, jobs that would lift families out of poverty and into the middle class. Cruz's voice remained measured. And what did you do? You led the opposition. You called it corporate greed. You attacked the tax incentives. You said, and I have the tweet right here, Amazon is a billion-dollar company. The idea that it will receive hundreds of millions of dollars in tax breaks at a time when our subway is crumbling and our communities need more investment, not less, is extremely concerning. He set down the tweet. Now, let me and explain how tax incentives work, because I do not think you understand them. At the time, New York was not giving Amazon $3 billion. They were offering to reduce Amazon's future taxes. If, and only if, Amazon created the promised jobs. No jobs, no tax break. It was performance-based. Cruz spoke slowly, as if explaining to a child, the money did not exist. Yet it would have been generated by Amazon's presence, by the jobs the economic activity, by the ripple effects throughout the local economy. You can not invest money that does not exist. You cannot redirect funds that has not been created. He pulled out another document, but you did not understand that, or you did not care. You rallied opposition. You attacked the deal relentlessly on social media. And in February 2019, Amazon announced they were pulling out of New York. Cruz read AOC's celebratory tweet slowly. Anything is possible. Today was the day a group of dedicated everyday New Yorkers and their neighbors defeated Amazon's corporate greed exploits its workers, the power of richest man in the world. He set down the paper. You celebrated, Congresswoman. You called it a victory. But let me tell you what you actually achieved. Cruz. Voice grew heaviest. 25,000 jobs gone. Average salary, $150 million gone. According to J.P. Morgan CEO Jaime Dimon, those direct jobs would have created another 75,000 indirect jobs. Quote, people who prepare meals and clean floors, to engineers, to MO, marketing people, to lawyers, to accountants, to service that whole ecosystem. He leans forward. That is 100,000 total jobs you helped kill, Congresswoman, in your own backyard for your own constituents. And you took a victory lap? AOC's voice rose sharply. Amazon was demanding corporate welfare. Amazon came anyway. Cruz interrupted. Did you know that December 2019, less than a year after your victory, Amazon announced they were opening an office in Manhattan, leasing space, hiring workers, no subsidies required? He paused meaningfully, but instead of 25,000 jobs, they are bringing about 1,500. Instead of a major headquarters, transforming Long Island City, Queens, gets nothing. Virginia gets the headquarters, the jobs, the economic development. Everything you threw away. Cruz's voice dropped. You mentioned $3 billion, but you cost them 25,000 jobs. You cost them billions in tax that would have been generated. You cost working families the opportunity to earn $150,000 salaries. He pulled out one final document when COVID hit in Tucson, New York, faced catastrophic job losses. The city's independent budget office estimated they could lose 475,000 jobs and $9.7 billion in tax revenue. And an editorial in the New York Daily News asked the obvious question, would it not be nice if the city and state at least knew that one of the world's largest companies, one of the rare concerns, predicted to thrive through the crisis, had made a long-term commitment to locate between 25,000 and 40,000 high-paying jobs? Here Cruz's voice was barely above a whisper. You cost a constituent's 25,000 jobs to prove a political point, and then you bragged about it. That is not progressive politics. Congresswoman, that is economic vandalism. He paused, gathering herself for what came next. But let me make this concrete. Because numbers can feel abstract. Let me tell you, about real people, Cruz's voice took on a different quality, softer, more personal. There is a woman named Maria. She lives in your district. She works 2 jobs. And before you say yes, some people actually do work 2 jobs. She is a housekeeper at a hotel during the day. She cleans offices at night. She has 3 kids. She has not taken a vacation in 4 years. He paused. Maria's son just graduated from CUNY with a degree in computer science. He is smart. He works hard, but he can't find a job that pays more than $45,000. He is living in his mother's apartment, trying to pay off student loans. Cruz's voice stiffened slightly. Amazon was going to hire 25,000 people, average salary $150,000. They were going to hire software engineers, data analysis, project managers. They were going to hire people like Maria's son. He leaned forward. But you killed that. You celebrated killing it. And Maria's son, he is still living in her apartment, still making $45,000, still drowning in debt. AOC opened her mouth to respond, but Cruz continued. There is a man named James. He owns a small restaurant near where Amazon would have built. He has been there for 12 years. He was, looking at the Amazon deal, thinking 25,000 workers who need lunch, 25,000 workers who might stop by for dinner, 25,000 potential customers. Cruz's voice dropped. After you killed the deal. James had to lay off 2 employees. He is barely hanging on during CO. He almost lost everything. He told a reporter, and this is a direct quote, I think about Amazon every day. I think about what could have been. He spread his hands. These are not statistics. Congresswoman, these are your constituents. People. You were elected to represent people whose lives would have been transformed by those jobs, and you sacrificed their futures because Amazon was founded by a billionaire, as you do not like. Cruz. The voice rose slightly. You claim to fight for working families, but when working families had a chance at $150,000 jobs, you fight to take that away. Chance when small business owners could have seen their revenues double as you celebrated their loss. He shook his head slowly. That is not progressive. That is not fighting for the little guy. That is ideologizing over people, and your constituents are paying the price. Cruz took a deep breath, as if gathering strength for the final assault. Let us talk about your vision for America, he said. The Green New Deal, your signature proposal, the plan you said will save the planet. He pulled out a thick report, or as your chief of staff, admitted before his convenient resignation, and the plan to change the entire economy. Not a climate thing, an economy thing. Cruz opened the report. The American Action Forum conducted an analysis of the Green New Deal. This is a center-right think tank, but it is run by Douglas Holtz-Eakin, who served as director of the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. He is not a partisan hack. He is a serious economist. Cruz began reading the numbers slowly. Estimated cost over 10 years between $51 trillion and $93 trillion let. Me? Break that down? $36 trillion for universal healthcare, up to $40.6 million for a guaranteed jobs program, $5.4 trillion to transition to renewable energy. He looked up. Let us put $93 trillion in perspective. The 93 entire federal budget is about $6 per year. Your plan would cost more than 15 times the entire federal budget every year. For 10 years, Cruz continued, the total GDP of the United States is about $25 trillion. Your plan would cost 4, almost times our entire economy in padded. National debt is about $31 trillion. Your plan would triple it and then some. He set down the report. The Heritage Foundation modeled just a fraction of the Green New Deal, a carbon tax, component. Their findings: 1.44 million jobs lost, $3.9 trillion in GDP reduction, household electricity costs up 12 to 14%, and that is just modeling a tiny piece of your proposal. Cruz shakes his head slowly when asked what we can say about how much. The Green New Deal would cost. Noah Kaufman, a research scholar at Columbia University's Center on Global Energy Policy, said, and I quote, basically, nothing. Why? Because your plan is so vague, so fantastical, that serious economists cannot even model it. He leans forward. Your plan calls for net zero emissions by 2030. That is 7 years away. You want to rebuild every building in America for energy efficiency, eliminate air travel, and replace it with high-speed rail. Guarantee a job to every American who wants one. Cruz's voice took on an incredible tone. California has been trying to build one high-speed rail line for over a decade. It is billions over budget and years behind schedule, and they still have not finished. You want to replace every airplane in America with trains. He pulled out one final document in March 2019. Senator McConnell brought the Green New Deal to a vote in the Senate. The result, 0 to 57. Not a single senator voted for it. Not one. Not even the Democrats, your own party, ran away from your signature proposal. Cruz spread his hands. Senator Ed Markey, who co-sponsored the resolution with you, vote present. He would not even vote for his own bill. That is how unserious your TELF proposal is. That is how fantastical. Even the people who support you publicly will not put their names on it. When it actually, he counts back. You have built a brand on this proposal. You have made it the centerpiece of your political identity. 3, and at 90 costs trillion, would destroy millions of jobs, and your own chief of staff admitted it was never really about climate in the first place. Cruz's voice dropped. It was about socialism, about government control, about changing the entire economy, and you have been selling it to the American people as environmentalism. The hearing room had grown deathly quiet. AOC sat motionless, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. Her press secretary had stopped taking notes. Even the reporter had stopped waiting. Typing Cruz straightened the papers in the front of him, his movements slow and deliberate. Let me summarize what we have learned today, Congresswoman. His voice was quiet, now almost conversational, but it carried to every corner of the chamber, who have built your political career on one central message: that you are different, that you are honest, that you fight corruption while everyone else enables it, that you represent working people while everyone else serves the powerful. He held up one finger. But your chief of staff ran $1 million dark money operation. He created PACs that funneled money to private companies. He controlled companies that, in at least one case, do not appear to be registered anywhere. Money from working-class donors disappeared into a black hole, and you have never explained where it went. A second finger. Your boyfriend received $6,000 from a PAC, controlled by your chief of staff, while your campaign was paid that same chief of staff's. The company, the FEC, received complaints. This might be an illegal scheme to funnel money to you personally, and you have never provided a clear explanation. A third finger. When the investigations heated up, and your own Democratic colleagues demanded action, your chief of staff conveniently resigned. The man who built your career, who controlled your financial operations, who knew where all the money went, he disappeared to work on climate policy, and before he left, he admitted your signature proposal was never really about climate at all. Economics degree. But you do not understand how the unemployment rate is calculated. The PolitiFact gave you their worst rating. Pants on fire for claiming unemployment is low because everyone has 2 jobs. You besant lecture Congress about economics policy while getting basic facts spectacularly wrong. A fifth finger, you killed 25,000 jobs in your own district to prove a political point about corporate welfare. Then, Amazon came to New York, anyway, without subsidies, bringing only 1,500 jobs. Instead of 25,000, your constituents lost out. You took a victory lap. Cruz lowered his hand, and your signature policy proposal, the Green New Deal, costs up to $93 billion. Would destroy millions of jobs, received 0 votes in the Senate, and was admitted by your own chief of staff to be about changing the entire economy, not saving the climate. He paused, letting the silence stretch. You came here today to lecture this committee about dark money and corruption. But on your operation ran the darkest money scheme in progressive politics. You came here to demand transparency, but you have never been transparent about where your donors' money went. You came here to champion working families, but you killed 25,000 jobs that could have lifted working families out of poverty. Cruz leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The difference between us, Congresswoman, is not ideological. I am a conservative. You are a progressive. We disagree. About policy, that is fine. That is democracy. His voice hardened. The difference is honesty. I tell people what I believe and let them decide. I do not pretend to be something I am not. I do not build a brand on fighting, corruption running, while a corrupt operation IDO, not lecture about transparency, while hiding money in shell companies. Cruz eyes locked on AOC's. You are not the future of the Democratic Party, Congresswoman. You are not even a new kind of politician. You are the oldest kind of. The politician who says one thing and does another, who builds a following by promising what you cannot deliver, who attacks others for the very things you do. Yourself, he sat back. The only thing new about you is the Instagram filter, but underneath it, you are just another politician who got caught along. Heavy silence filled the chamber. Cruz spoke one final time, his voice quiet but clear. I have no further questions. Mr. Chairman, Senator Graham's gavel fell. This hearing is adjourned, the room shouted reporters, rushing towards the exits, cameras flashing. But through it all, one image dominated: Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, sitting alone at the witness table, staring straight ahead, saying nothing. She had no response. There was nothing to say 3 days later. Headline: Cruz AOC hearing goes viral. 87 million views. And counting, the clip of Cruz closing statement had become the most watched political video of the year. It played on loop on Fox News. It was dissected on MSNBC. Even outlets sympathetically, AOC could not avoid covering it. The Washington Post fact-checked Cruz claims their verdict mostly accurately. They noted that the FEC complaints were real. The financial transfers were documented, Chakra Arti quotes were verified, and the Amazon jobs numbers were correct. The New York Times editorial board, while defending AOC's policy statements, acknowledged that the questions Cruz raised about campaign finance deserve answers. But no, answers came 3 weeks later. AOC's approval rating in the district dropped 11 points. A primary challenger announced a pattern of hypocrisy that betrayed our community. Her office released a statement calling Cruz's presentation a politically motivated smear, based on right-wing conspiracy theories. But the statement did not address any specific allegations. It did not explain the LLC payments. It did not clarify the boyfriend's compensation. It did not respond to Chakra Art's admission about the Green New Deal. It was, in the words of one commentator, a denial. 6 weeks later, at a town hall in the Bronx, AOC faced her constituents for the first time since the hearing. Why did your chief of staff's company get paid over $1 million, a woman in the bussin' and 17? A front row asked, where did that money go? AOC's response was halting defensive. Those were legitimate campaign expenses. The FEC never found any misconduct, but you never explained what the money was. For the woman pressed, you talk about transparency. So, be transparent. Tell us where the money went. AOC. He could not answer in the back of the room. A man held a sign that had become ubiquitous at her public appearances since the hearing. It read simply, "Dark Socialist Money." The phrase had stuck. What began as Cruz's accusation had become a label, a shorthand for everything her critics believed about her. 2 months later, Senator Ted Cruz sat in his office in Houston, reviewing Constitute mail. His aide knocked on the door. The numbers from the hearing are in, she said, combined views across all platforms over 200 million. It is the most watched recorded hearing testimony since Watergate. Cruz nodded slowly. It was never about the views. Then, what was it? About Cruz. Set down the letter he had been reading. She built a brand on moral superiority better than everyone else. Cleaner, more honest, more committed to the little guy. He paused, but she was not any of those things. Her operation was as dirty as any I have seen dirtier. Maybe because she hid it behind all that self-righteousness. He turned to look out. The window at the Houston skyline. The American people deserve to know who they are really voting for. Not the Instagram image, not the carefully crafted brand. The real person, the real record. His aide. Waiting, she will survive. Cruz continued. She is talented. She knows how to work the media. But she will never be able to claim the moral high ground again. Not without someone reminding everyone what her operations actually did. He turned back to his desk. That is accountability. That is how democracy is. You're supposed to work, you make claims, you get held to them, you demand standards, you get judged by them, you attack others for corruption, you better make sure your own house is clean. He picked up the next. Letter hers was not 3 months later. In a surprise announcement, AOC declared she will not seek leadership positions in the next Congress. She cited a desire to focus on constituent services and grassroots organizing political observers, noted that her influence within the Democratic caucus had waned. Significantly, since the hearing, progressive groups that once treated her as their standard-bearer had quietly begun promoting other voices. The dark money socialist label had proved impossible to shake. In a profile for The Atlantic, a Democratic strategist who requested anonymously offered this assessment. She broke the cardinal rule of politics. She built her entire brand on being different, on being clean, on being morality superior to everyone else. And then she got caught doing exactly what she accused everyone else of doing. That is not something voters forget. Article concludes with a quote from AOC herself. From an interview conducted 6 weeks after the hearing, I have no regrets about fighting for working families. I have no regrets about taking on powerful interests, and I have no regrets about my record. But notably, she did not address Cruz specifically, alleged she never did. And in Washington, that silence spoke louder than any statement could have. 8 months later, a moment that would define the new political reality. AOC was walking through the halls of the Rayburn House office building when a group of interns recognized her. In the old days, before the hearing, they would have rushed over for selfies. They would have gushed about her Instagram. They would have asked for autographs. Now, one of them simply held up her phone and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Hey, it is the dark money socialists, their friends," laughed AOC, kept walking, her face a mask. The nickname had become inescapable. It appeared in op-eds and cable news chyrons. Conservative influencers used it as shorthand. Even some progressive critics, disappointed by the unanswered admitted, had adopted variations of it. Tax. The rich had been replaced by something far less flattering in a podcast interview. A former aide who had left her office spoke anonymously about the mood. After the hearing, it was devastating. The aide said she really believed she was different. She really believed her operation was clean. And then, Cruz just dismantled that narrative piece by piece with receipts. The interviewer asked how AOC had responded internally. She was angry. She wanted to fight back. But there was nothing to fight back with. The facts were the facts. The FEC complaints were real. The payments were documented. Chuck Robart's quotes were on video. A pause. She kept saying she did everything legal, but that was not the point. The point was hypocrisy. She had spent years attacking dark money, while her own operation was as opaque as anything in Washington, legal or not. It destroyed her brand. The aide's voice grew quieter. I think that is what hurt. Most not the arguments themselves, but the realization that she was not who she thought she was, that the movement she had built was based on a story that was not entirely true. 1 year later, the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History opened a new exhibit on 21st century political communication among the N7 artifacts. AOC's Tax the Rich dress from the 2021 Met Gala. The placard beside it had been updated since the dress was first acquired. It now includes a note about the House Ethics Committee investigation that followed the event, the investigation that found she had violated House Rules be accepting impermissible gifts below. That a smaller note mentions the Cruz hearing and its aftermath. The dress that was supposed to symbolize a political revolution had become something else entirely, a reminder that, in politics as in life, the gap between image and reality eventually catches up with everyone, even especially those who built their careers on closing it. Final scene. 2 years after the hearing, a young woman sat in a coffee shop in Queens, scrolling through her phone. She had voted for AOC twice. She had donated $50 to her first campaign. She had believed. Now, she was reading an article about AOC's declining influence, about the unanswered questions about the dark money socialist label that would not go away. She thought about that $50. She thought about where it might have gone. She thought about how she had defended AOC on social media, attacking anyone who criticized her as a sexist or a racist or a tool of the establishment. And she thought about Ted Cruz, of all people, being the one to expose what she now suspected had always been true, that AOC was never really different. She was just better at pretending to be. The young woman closed her phone. She would not donate again. She would not defend again. She would not believe again. Not in AOC, and maybe not in anyone. That was the real cost of the dark money socialists' downfall. Not just one politician career, but the trust of an entire generation that had dared to hope for something better, and that, trust once broken, might never be repaired.